Hello, welcome to the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm McKelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 67 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 66 of A Game of Thrones. That's Bran 7.
And I bet you know what I'm about to say.
I do.
You do.
But I'm reading it. So.
I have a hunch most of our listeners do as well. We're going to chat about the chapter, and we're going to try not to spoil any future plot points for you. And hopefully, we're going to provide you with some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what's happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some reader mail. Be sure to check out the show notes that provide some additional information, which will be handy if you're not reading along with us.
Indeed.
How are you, McKelly?
I am doing pretty good. How about you?
That's good. You know me, I'm always upbeat.
Yes.
Nothing gets me down.
That's right. That is one thing I know about you, and I know your brother will agree. There was a mysterious comment left on our 50th anniversary YouTube video that said, laid back, are you out of your mind?
No, I wasn't arguing that point here. I was just saying I'm upbeat. I'm not always laid back. You were wrong about that, McKelly.
Well, in my nearly 2 decades of knowing you, that is my interpretation of you anyway.
So, subject to my brother, he had a funny story for me this weekend. He has a cat flap into his house, and he has 2 cats.
Right.
But a third cat has been breaking in and stealing their food and bullying them. And so...
I guess that's the downside. When you just have a random cat flap, you need to have like some kind of code on it or something.
Exactly, yeah. So he lives in France, and so I guess the French treat animals differently than I would. But he gets this cat and he stuffs it in a crate, and he gets in his car and he drives like 5 kilometers down the road.
Okay.
And he turfs it out, And he said, he put up with it for a while, but he said it was really, he was like, this cat was bullying his cats. So he said like a day later, that cat is back in his house eating his food again.
Wow.
So you don't know what 5 kilometers is. It's like 3 miles. Something like that.
Yeah.
So
I can tell you my dog would not be able to get home if I drove for 3 miles in any random direction.
So he gets it again, sticks it back in the crate, puts it back in the car, and now he drives 10 kilometers.
Oh, wow. Okay. Doubling the distance, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And day and a half later, the cat is back. He's like, I don't believe it. So he says, okay, I'm going to go further, and if it comes back, it's my cat from now on. I'm just going to keep it. Okay. So he goes 20 kilometers, which includes crossing a freeway. There's no way this cat can get back this time.
You cross the English Channel.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. Yeah, you're practically into the channel by this point. So 2 days later, the cat is back.
No way.
Yep, completely. So he's like, well, I made a promise. If you got back, you were my cat, so you're my cat now. So he puts it in the crate again. The cat's like, wait a minute. But just to take it to the vet, because it's a boy cat. And it's got, it needs to be fixed. So he takes it to the vet, and he arrives at the vet, and the vet says, not you again. My brother's like...
He's a frequent flyer at the vet.
The cat's got a microchip, and each time, the cat never walked home, people brought the cat to the vet. The vet scanned the microchip, and they dropped it off at my brother's next door neighbour.
Oh, that's fantastic. So it's the neighbour's cat.
It's the neighbour's cat. My brother's not telling him that he's 3 times tried to get rid of it.
If he had tried one more time, he really might have taken him across the English Channel.
So, man. Yes. I
Good
thought you'd
stuff.
like that story.
I do indeed.
Well, we don't have a very long chapter here, but then again, nothing happens because we're still in coronavirus lockdown. So.
Yeah, no real interesting stories going on in my life. I was thinking while I was editing the episode that's coming up next week, I was thinking I should remind folks that if they do ever get tired of listening to us blab on in this section, which I can't imagine anyone would. I know. I can tell by your face you're as puzzled as I would be by this idea. But if you ever were to, I do put chapter markers in each episode, so they could just skip directly to the character recap and cut out all of this excitement and enlightenment.
Well, that's interesting. Now I know.
Yes, and now the listeners know, so no one may ever hear this again.
Actually, thinking about the last one we recorded. So the last one we recorded was, backward spoiler alert, Ned getting decapitated, right?
Yes. I hope you just didn't come in right now. Ned got what?
I did say spoiler alert. I do the comparison with the television show, as you know. This is not news to you.
I do.
I missed a bit because that chapter was represented at the end of episode 9 of the first season, but it actually spills over into the beginning of episode 10.
Oh,
so I actually missed a little bit. Let me fill in the blank right now, if I may.
Yes, all right.
The TV show definitely concluded that Yoren was cutting Arya's hair, because that's what he does. He drags her off and cuts her hair.
Okay.
Cuts it short to make her look
I was
like
just listening to that part last night when I was editing it, and I thought, I wonder what why didn't I ask him what the TV show had, what the TV show did?
Because all I watched was until the end of the episode, you see. I didn't think to start the next episode too. But the next episode actually starts with ice dripping blood.
Oh, man.
And then it pans to Arya and Yoren. Her against his chest with her eyes closed, and then he drags her off into a sort of dark alley and cuts her hair.
Hacks at her hair with a knife. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
So I did miss that. Sorry. I'll try to be more careful with my watching of the show.
Well, you're on the final episode of the season, right? So
yes. Hopefully, I won't have to jump around anymore. Yeah.
Right.
All right. So anyway, let's get down to business with a quick recap of what Bran was up to last time we saw him. As we saw of Bran, he was watching the Great Northern Host assemble at Winterfell. He talked with Osha in the Godswood about her warning to Robb that he and his men were marching in the wrong direction. Bran and Hodor then watched as Robb led the army out of Winterfell, leaving Bran as the Stark in Winterfell. Obviously, unusually forgetting Rickon in the process. The only Stark in... Wait a minute. That's not right. Alright, so why don't we give them a summary of this one?
Alright. Bran and Maester Luwin survey the sorry scene as Ser Rodrick Cassel puts the latest Winterfell recruits through their paces. The cream of the northern soldiery went to King's Landing and aren't coming back. Tier 2 are with Robb, so now it's the dregs, but the walls of Winterfell need be manned. Maester Luwin is using a telescope to inspect a red comet that has recently appeared.
Bran recounts his dream of the night before, in which the three-eyed crow took him to the crypts under Winterfell, where he met his father. Bran's father, not the crow's father. We don't know who that is.
Glad you cleared that up.
On waking, Bran tried to visit the crypts, but Hodor was too scared to go down there. Luwin's not worried by the dream, but they decide to go down there with Osha, who's no longer chained. She can carry Bran.
As they walk past the Stark tombs, Bran gives Osha history lessons. And when they reach Ned's tomb, a monster leaps out of it and attacks Luwin. Bran sets Summer on the monster, and the two fight. Rickon then comes out of the tomb and calls Shaggydog, it was not an undead Stark, thankfully, to heal. Luwin has a nasty wound on his arm, and both wolves are bloodied. Rickon was down there because he had the same dream as Bran.
They head up to the Maester's tower to patch up Luwin, who tries to explain away the shared dream. But Osha is ready to believe that the boys have intuited something. This leads to a long discussion about the children of the forest, who often were able to understand and read each other's dreams, in which Luwin shows and gifts obsidian or dragonglass arrowheads to the boys. These were forged by the children of the forest.
The tale is cut short as the two direwolves suddenly begin to howl. A raven has arrived, and Bran and Rickon hug. The news is what all feared it would be.
Yeah, so given that the central action of this chapter actually happens in the previous chapter, we don't have an awful lot to discuss here.
Right.
This whole what are they? Is their dream true or not? Well, we already knew it was true.
Yes,
we read about that last time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It is like with a lot of Bran chapters. There's not a ton to talk about yet with his stuff. It's more, a lot of times with the younger kids, there's not. No, that wasn't the case last week with Arya, because obviously she was seeing.
There was quite a lot of action in that one. Yes.
Yes.
More than I needed.
Right.
Well, one thing I will say just before we start actually is that I'd completely forgotten about the red comet. This comet, and reading up on it, it's fairly substantial. It's like it's brighter than the moon, so visible in the daytime.
Yeah.
And covered half the sky. Some reports said anyway.
So I wonder if it is at this point because it's newly on the scene.
You know your comets, sir. They get brighter. They don't appear at their brightest and then disappear. They get brighter and then they get less bright as time goes by.
Look at me with my knowledge.
The comet is known as, not in all parts, but it is known as King Joffrey's comet because it coincided with his coming to the throne.
Right? Yeah. I'm sure it's got various names in various locations.
It does. Yes, obviously. In Essos, for instance, they don't call it King Joffrey's comet.
Could not care less about King Joffrey or his comet.
And I think in the north, they'll never call it King Joffrey's comet.
Right.
They might call it Ned's comet.
Yes. So the first thing that struck me at the very beginning of the chapter is that it's rather worrisome. So basically, as we mentioned in the summary, Ser Rodrick is trying to condition what few recruits he could muster up to try and create some sort of household guard for Winterfell and the Starks, and it's not going very well. And it's a little bit worrisome that they left the cupboard so bare. And thankfully Winterfell is surrounded by miles and miles of northern land. It's got that going for it.
We did talk about this, didn't we? I think when the Northern Army was leaving, the last Bran chapter, we talked about this a little bit. That Winterfell is pretty much undefended, other than by its being deep in the heart of the North.
Right.
But
yes.
And it's hard to get to the North by land because you'd have to come via the Neck, and that's not easy to navigate, as we know. But you could sail around it.
Yes.
And all of the towns and beaches of the north are empty because everyone's gone off to fight in the south. So if you wanted to, this is a vulnerability for the Starks, which that perhaps they haven't thought through.
Yeah, and the longer this fighting goes on, the more likely their enemies or those who might care to take advantage of this will hear about it and have time to think, hey, you know what? If all of the Stark forces are in the Riverlands or have been lost in King's Landing, they're pretty vulnerable up there. I believe they've got an 8-year-old running things.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I mean, remember we were talking last time about the balance of captives. And now the Starks have a much stronger group of captives than do the Lannisters. Well, the Lannisters could equalise this by sending a raiding party up here, grab the one remaining Stark, Bran.
Oh, wait.
And that might help to redress the balance that they let slip away last time.
Yeah. You wonder, I mean, Ned's pretty heads-up guy. I guess he felt like, oh, man.
You're a monster.
I am. What terrible thing for me to say about poor Eddard Stark. He's a pretty smart guy. But I guess when he left, he felt like he was leaving plenty of soldiers behind to defend Winterfell.
Right, he was.
Yeah.
He was taking the cream of the crop because he was leaving the huge crop behind. But now that huge crop is no longer in the north. So.
Yes. Remember in Cat 2, when Cat was trying to convince him to go south, when he and Luwin and Cat were talking, he referred to going to King's Landing as a nest of adders. So I guess he felt he needed to have his cream of the crop there to keep him safe. But as we see, not many people left now. But one thing Roderick said that made me laugh, he was disparaging the new recruits, and he said that some of them were fighting like geese, like you peck him and he pecks you back. And one of the recruits laughs and he says, "You laugh, huh? That's funny. You fight like a hedgehog." And I thought, that doesn't seem too bad. Hedgehogs have pretty good defenses and a pretty effective offense.
Well, I think you're giving them a bit too much credit. They're good defensively, but I don't think they actually run around trying to spike you. I think they just curl up and hope you are deterred.
Go away. I did look it up. Some of them do throw themselves and their quills at you. Yes.
Get out.
I looked it up last night before I was thinking about this.
I do apologize. What do I know?
What did I know beforehand? And who knows? That was a Wikipedia page. It's not like I have spoken to a zoologist about it.
Hedgehog lore. Thank you.
Yeah.
But actually, I don't think geese is that bad either. I mean, have you ever sort of been attacked by a goose? It's absolutely terrifying.
Do you remember when one of our colleagues got attacked by a goose in the parking lot of our building?
No.
There's a colleague whose first name begins with a T, and office was on your hallway there. She was trying to get, how the geese get, because we've got a big lake right by our buildings. Uh-huh. And the male goose, I think, was protecting a female goose that must have been getting ready to hatch some geeselings, and he charged her and knocked it. She was backpedaling and fell over.
I don't remember this story. That's awesome. Well, there you are, you see. Rodrick is totally wrong.
Exactly. Hey, if they had a bunch of geese and hedgehogs, they might be better off than he thinks.
So Bran dreamt about talking with Ned down in the crypts. Ned was supposed to... Bran reported that Ned was very sad in the conversation. And interesting what he said, that he was sad about Jon.
Yeah. And that's not the first time we've very recently heard about Ned being sad about Jon when he was down in the dungeons. The line was, "The thought of Jon filled Ned with a sense of shame and sorrow too deep for words. If only he could see the boy again, sit and talk with him." So,
I'd forgotten that, yes. I'd forgotten that. So this is not just Bran just dreaming. This is all sort of prophetic. This is all...
Maybe.
He knows that Ned is dead, and he knows that Ned was thinking about Jon when he died,
Or at least shortly before he died, he was sad thinking about Jon. Yeah. So maybe it seems like the sadness comes from not having whatever conversation he wanted to have with Jon.
We know what that is, don't we? The conversation we wanted to hear. Why don't you go up and tell him who his mother was?
That is, yeah, exactly. That there is something there about. Well, I had it scheduled to talk about later, but we could talk about it now. Are Rickon and Bran the only two to have this dream, or do all the Stark kids? Will they all end up having had this dream? Sansa
didn't need to have it because she witnessed it.
Yeah.
Arya's going to have it every night from now on.
Right.
And we haven't talked to Rob yet, so we'll find out, I guess.
Yeah, and Jon. Wonder,
Jon too, yeah.
I wondered if maybe it's just because of their proximity to the crypts. Maybe there's, some spiritual tie to the crypts that allowed them to have the same dream.
His spirit came home, and so they bumped into it.
Right, yeah. But Ned also recently dreamt about being in the crypts in the very beginning of the chapter where he finds out that Robert was gored by the boar. I think it was Ned 13. In his dream, he came to the tombs. He was in the crypts, and he came to the tombs of his dad, sister, and brother. And like he always does when he's around his sister, he heard the "Promise me, Ned," and then he woke up. So a lot of that's not the only dreams that take place in the crypts. Jon, as we've heard a couple times now, dreams about having to go into the crypts and not wanting to. He's going down there to find his father. And in the very last dream, remember he told us about that dream. It's a reoccurring one. He told us about it first when he met Sam. When he and Sam were sitting outside of the dining hall after the first time they met, he told him that story. And then he mentioned it again, having it again, but it was a little bit further this time. This time he went down into the tombs, and the tombs started opening, and the dead kings and lords of the Starks started to come out of their tombs. So
It's a good job you're here, because, I mean, literally, I'd forgotten all this, but it's, I mean, they do dream about the crypts. I wonder if it's like, this is early separation from your parents, and that could lead you to think about them dying, and I wonder if, for the Starks, dying means going to the crypts, you know what I mean? And so it's actually kind of fairly natural. Obviously there's a little bit of superstitious magicalness about the fact that Rickon and Bran had this same dream on the same night, but maybe sort of the more general thing of the Stark children dreaming of Ned's death was just a pure consequence of the separation that they're feeling.
Yeah, that's kind of what Luwin suggests later on. But also, most of us don't have all of their family buried underneath their house. So, that connection to their dead family members might be something that causes them all to frequently dream about being in these crypts.
Most of us law-abiding citizens don't have our families buried under the house.
It's true. Yep. I can't say we all don't, but most of us don't.
But yeah, you're right. So there is something about Jon in particular in the crypts, and it's more than just he dreams of the crypt. He dreamt of the crypts before Ned died,
right?
Frequently,
according to him.
Whereas Rickon and Bran, it's definitely connected to their father's death.
Yeah, I don't know that we have yet enough pieces to solve any puzzle about why Jon dreams about the crypts and why Ned is in the crypts thinking about Jon, but. Maybe it's just something we can keep pointing out as we see it and keep collecting the pieces and see if we get a big enough.
Yeah, but whatever it is, it's definitely overlaid with his being a bastard. That's the overlay. Is he entitled to a place in the crypts?
Yeah, very much. Yeah, that could definitely be
not
confusion
a Stark,
about his parentage and The crypts are kind of like a Stark family history down there, and his feeling of inadequacy and whether or not he belongs. Yeah. I could see that.
So when this chapter started, I was interested that Bran was having another part of this chapter was Bran's dream, and how Bran seems to be a lot of Bran chapters are about the dreams that he's having and his interactions with the three-eyed crow and what have you. But then this was kind of undercut here by Rickon having the same dream. I thought Bran is becoming a character who's a little bit metaphysical because he's lost the ability to walk, so now he's sort of like living this dream life. But then Rickon dreamed the same dream. So
yeah, that put a bit of a wrinkle in my thoughts as well. It makes you wonder if, we assume that Bran was getting these kind of dreams because of his interaction with the three-eyed crow. But if Ricken's having such dreams, is it something as normal for the Starks we just had not heard about? Ned's a pretty practical guy, so if he were aware of these supernatural elements in his family, like they all have these kind of prophetic dreams at times, you'd think he would be maybe a little less practical.
Yes, I can't really see Ned Stark at a seance anytime soon.
Right, exactly, that's what I'm getting at, exactly. But I also wondered if maybe the introduction of the direwolves was some kind of catalyst for this kind of ability. It seemed at the time a coincidence that there were 2 girl and 4 boy direwolf pups. One of them was a loner, a ghost was left by itself, and that fits perfectly with the Stark kids. But maybe that wasn't a coincidence. Maybe there's more to that.
Yeah, I mean, they're creatures that were believed to be extinct, right? And so there they were, practically mythical creatures living amongst them. Yeah.
The sigil of their house, the exact number, and the exact the exact percentage of sex of the kids. So maybe it is more than just a coincidence, and maybe these kind of dreams for the Starks are related to increased others movement in the north of the Wall.
Right. Yeah, I mean, right back in the first Bran chapter, when we met the direwolves, they were talking about that being a sort of historical thing, that the Starks had direwolves in ancient times when they also dealt with Grumpkins and Snarks from beyond the Wall.
Right? Yeah. And I was also thinking maybe this comet, this comet seems to coincide with, new things happening, or maybe it's messing with things.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it's blood red definitely sort of like gives it a, you've got to think that after that crow arrives, the raven arrives telling you that your father's been beheaded. The next time you look up and see that red comet, that's going to make an association in your mind as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. Like you, I thought Bran was special with his dreaming, and now Rickon is having the same dream, and that makes me wonder.
But maybe that's just this one dream. Maybe Bran will continue to be special with his dreams,
Right.
But once it transpires that the two boys have had the same dreams, even Luwin, who issues all of this fantastical nonsense, is pretty shaken by the fact. And he, like you said, he tried to explain it by saying both of them miss their fathers. It's natural for them to have these concerns.
Yeah. But it's just, then a raven shows up and says exactly what they were saying in their dreams. And I just wonder, as a man of science, how that will affect him, if he will chalk it up to mere coincidence, or if that will affect his perception of things. Maybe he will have a more open mind when it comes to supernatural type stuff.
Can I take the role of Maester Luwin for a moment?
Absolutely.
I see myself as a man of science.
I agree. Yes.
I don't think of myself as very superstitious or anything like that. If I was Maester Luwin here, I would be like, oh my god, these boys foretold what happened.
Right.
And if a raven didn't arrive yesterday that I missed and they got, this is really spooky. That's how I would be.
Maybe they've been punking him. Maybe they wrote the letter, put it on a raven.
This raven seems beaten up. It looks like it's been mauled by a dire wolf. Nothing to do with us, Luwin.
Yeah.
And the handwriting, it's awfully like yours, Rickon.
Looks a bit like a 4-year-old's.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say for sure. I mean, there's being someone who. What is a man of science? A man of science is someone who wants evidence to believe things.
Yeah.
Well, there's evidence right here.
Right.
Pretty strong evidence.
Yes, absolutely. He and Osha have been going back and forth. This whole chapter, they keep going back and forth about the existence of the children of the forest, whether they're gone, or Osha says they've just gone into hiding in the north. And, we were talking before, it was the last Bran chapter, about how Osha claims that there's giants currently existing in the north, and that we had said, if their giants are as prevalent as Osha claims they are, that Maester Aemon would likely have heard from some of the Night's Watch scouts about sightings or some kind of evidence, and mentioned it to the Citadel that, hey, we're getting evidence that the giants still exist up here. So,
right.
maybe this will open his eyes to maybe Asha's right about the other supernatural beings as well.
Yeah, it's difficult though, because she is an unlettered savage,
right? Yes.
And probably for everything that she believes in, that she's seen, she believes in things that she's heard about,
Right.
And so picking those apart.
Yes, exactly. As a man of science, he would need to see more than just her saying, well, I'm telling you, there's also children of the forest and giants.
I'm just saying, yeah. The note here has just made me laugh. The children of the forest would be harder to spot than the
giants. Yeah, I was thinking about if there's giants up north of the wall, you would think that the members of the Night's Watch might have seen some evidence. It would be much harder for that to be true for children of the forest.
Very true.
They're smaller, and they probably blend in a little better.
Yes, indeed. So Osha has been, her chain's been removed, but the shackles, which is the bands around her ankles, have been kept in place, but the chain is gone. So she's free to move around, but has a constant, probably annoying reminder that she is captive.
I found that it was a little bit trustworthy of Luwin to allow her to carry Bran down all the stairs, down into the crypts with those shackles around her legs. She'd get tripped up, they would all go, both go for quite the spill.
Well, presumably they don't have anything dangling. They're just like clasps.
Oh, you don't think they're connected by the...
No, that's the bit that's been gone. The chain is gone, you see. So she's got the clasps, but nothing connecting them. Yeah,
I was thinking her arm, like there was something connecting to her arms that had been removed. She just got the metal around her ankles.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, that wouldn't be trusting, that would be silly.
Yeah. I
thought... you with your feet tied together, carry this child down those stone stairs.
That makes much more sense now. I was thinking, wow, that is really dangerous, Luwin. Come on.
So she gets a lot of Stark history while they're down in the tombs, including the story of Lyanna'S death, which she thinks is very sad, because it is. But she thinks that the empty holes that are waiting for the Stark children are even sadder, and she might have a point there.
Yes. We talked about that before.
Yeah. The Starks are ever so practical, but that's kind of grim.
Well, why don't you dig 6 or 7 holes? Just, just so you don't have to come down and do it later. It's chilly down here. I think it was the very first Ned chapter we talked about how grim it was to already have those holes dug ahead of time. Yeah. And Bran mentions, though, that Lyanna and Brandon are not supposed to have statues when he's giving this history lesson as they walk through. And I think we also mentioned this in the past, but the statues are only for kings and lords, Starks that were kings and or lords. But Ned loved them so much that he had statues put in anyway.
Can I just say that is a little bit non-Ned-like? That's a little out of character for Ned Stark.
You're right. It is a little bit out of character.
I like it. I mean, it makes me want to wipe away a tear, but it's not like him. It's surprising that he would do
he's
that.
more of a letter of the law kind of guy.
Exactly.
Because any Stark can be buried in the crypts. Obviously, there's holes waiting in the ground for Stark children who may never be lords of Winterfell. It's only they can't. Normally, statues are reserved for lords, and the iron longswords that sit across their laps are usually also reserved for lords or kings, and those are to keep the vengeful spirits in the crypt. That was mentioned in that first Ned chapter. Yeah.
So when they get to Ned's tomb, which I think it's strange that Luwin would go to this much trouble, honestly.
I agree, yes.
Where you're like, okay, you've had a dream which might mean that something's happened to your father, but he's not literally in the tomb, I promise you. But I guess he wanted to show that, so he opens the tomb, and a huge slavering monster jumps out and attacks him. Yeah. I would have passed water. I mean, in the dark as well. I mean, it's like, yeah.
I said during the Whispering Woods chapter that I thought it was a good one for Halloween because it was kind of spooky. This one would have been better. The actual line is, the darkness sprang at him, snarling. Bran saw eyes like green fire, a flash of teeth, fur as black as the pit around them. That would be terrifying, especially if you're Luwin, because it's literally chomping down on your arm.
Although Luwin perhaps was the first to know that it was Shaggydog, because he was like, I've been bitten by this thing before.
Good point. Yeah, everyone down there, minus Rickon, would be terrified at that moment.
But so Bran sets Summer on whatever it is. I think before he knows that it's Shaggydog, he says Summer. Summer goes and attacks it
because Summer wouldn't go down. Summer stayed back at the top of the stairs. He refused to come down with them until Bran shouted for Summer, and then Summer came rushing to their rescue.
I forgot that. Yes, that's right. I thought he was just there by his heel, but yeah, you're right. But that's then strange now because I would have thought that Summer would have been aware of Shaggydog's presence down there by smell.
I agree. Yes.
Yeah. Or maybe that's why he didn't want to go down. Oh, no. There's a jump scare waiting for you.
Jump scare, I like it.
But what interested me was when the two wolves fight, eventually Rickon comes out and says, Shaggydog, and Shaggydog comes to him. So it's like he has trained him.
Right.
But he's trained him to be half wild, basically.
Yeah. Luwin says to Bran later, not later, like a few seconds later, that Shaggy can't come with them back out of the crypts because he has to be chained, and Bran thinks in his head the or killed. But I thought maybe someone should have been helping the 3-year-old train the incredibly dangerous wild animal. They might not be. They might not be. I mean, you just left it to the 3-year-old?
Yeah. He's absolutely trained the wolf to the best of his abilities, to the level of his own moral code.
Right.
But he is 3, so how is he supposed to know that you shouldn't bite people?
Yeah. I don't know. I've been wondering this all along. Like, I know he's 4 now, but through most of this book, he's been 3.
Right. Yes, he's 4. Yeah.
I mean, now
no excuses, Rickon.
Right. But I thought, then they go back up to Luwin's tower, back, Luwin's chambers where he lives, and first he says, "No, this isn't happening," because Bran says, "Come on, we're all going to go up to your tower," and he's like, "Nope, sorry, that's not happening." And Osha's like, "Well, Bran's the Lord here, so we're going because he said so." And they get up there, and there's more kind of chaos going on up there, and I just thought Luwin has amazing patience. Like, so far, he's indulged Bran's crazy dream talk enough to take him down into the crypts. Then he is attacked by Shaggy, overruled by an 8-year-old about Shaggy, and taking 2 direwolves and Rickon, who's just as wild, up into his chambers. Osha keeps going on and on about the children of the forest and the giants, contradicting everything that he says. But still, he's like keeping his cool. He's helping Bran with counting lessons, and he's helping Rickon with counting lessons, and he's giving Bran history lessons. I would have snapped at these little brats hours ago.
You raise an excellent point. In fact, I think for me that the cherry on the top of this awful Sunday that he's being forced to drink is that while he's having his arm patched up, his horribly mauled, bloody arm patched up, the perpetrator is sitting in the room licking its own wounds, like he belongs.
Right.
I can do it again anytime I want.
And the person putting, the bandages on his arm keeps contradicting everything he's telling Bran about the children of the forest.
Oh, where's that chain? So the chapter ends with the arrival of the Raven. So and interestingly, what you were saying before about the wolves being sort of like the harbinger of the boys being more attuned to the supernatural world. The wolves start to howl just before the Raven arrives.
Yeah, right.
They have this sudden howling session.
Yeah.
And then they stop howling, and then the Raven arrives with the news. And I think Luwin takes the note from the Raven's leg, and I think Bran asks, "What does it say?" And Osha says, "Oh, you already know what it says."
Right. Yeah.
And Luwin, again, Rickon is only 4, so it's a little bit cryptic what Luwin says. He actually says, "We need to find a stonemason who remembers your father well," or something like that. It's a slightly
something like that.
Slightly cryptic way to say your father's dead.
Right. Yeah. Rickon might be like, "And? What does that mean? Is he coming home and we're making a portrait of him?"
So yeah, that's about it. There wasn't an awful lot to do in that chapter, but we got some background because there was quite a lot of background given in the chapter. Most of the children of the forest background, I think we already gave when we talked about the weirwoods and things. So I mean,
90% of it we'd already covered.
But we got a long catalogue of Stark grandees,
right?
So we'll just go through those. So there was Jon Stark. He was king in the north. So if he's a king in the north, that means he predates Aegon Targaryen, who basically stripped the lords of the Seven Kingdoms of their kingliness, and brought it all under his control. Jon Stark was known to have driven sea raiders out from the east. He built the castle at White Harbour. which is not Newcastle, the current seat of House Manderley. He built the Wolf's Den, which is now used as a prison.
And then we've got King Rickard Stark. He is Jon's son, and he annexed the Neck to be part of the North. There's more to that story. We'll get into it another day, the annexing of the Neck. But then we get Theon Stark, and he's a pretty interesting character, actually. He was king of the North at the time of the Andal invasion, and he was constantly and pretty much successfully at war with the Andals. Now, he was aided by House Bolton, and House Bolton we're familiar with so far because we've met Roose Bolton. He's leading the other half of the northern host that Robb was not leading. And King Theon defeated the Andal warlord Argo Sevenstar in the Battle of the Weeping Water. And it wasn't enough for him, though. He then took the fight to the Andals' home. He sailed across the Narrow Sea to the coast of Andalos, with Argos's body displayed on the prow of his ship like a figurehead. Theon then burned a bunch of Andal villages, killing hundreds and capturing 3 tower houses and a fortified sept, and the king displayed the spiked heads of his victims along the coastline to deter future invaders.
Yeah, it was pretty serious.
Yeah, there's even more interesting stuff about King Theon, but we'll talk about that another time. Okay.
So Brandon the Shipwright was a king in the north. He loved the sea, and his demise was that he sailed west across the Sunset Sea in search of Asshai, I think, and never returned. So his tomb is empty, which is unusual, I think. Typically, Starks come home.
I guess his plan, because he sailed west across the Sunset Sea, and Asshai is as far to the east as you can possibly get. So I think his plan was to sail around and see if he could come up the other way. I guess, because either that or he was really bad at directions, because he went west to go really far east.
Yeah. And Brandon the Shipwright was succeeded by his son, Brandon the Burner, so named because in grief over his father's death, he burned all the ships that he took,
right,
because he didn't want any part of that. Roderick Stark is known to have won Bear Island for the North from the Ironborn. Possibly just a rumour, but that he won it through a wrestling contest. According to the World of Ice and Fire, some maesters believe that there is truth to that story. The kings of the Iron Islands were often felt the need to prove their prowess and right to their crown with feats of strength. Other scholars question the tale and suggest that Roderick won the island back with his clever words.
Boring.
Yeah, I don't know. Winning a whole island with your smarts, it could be interesting.
Yeah, I guess so. Then we get Torrhen Stark. He's the king who knelt.
Yes. So the last Stark king, right?
Yes. Yes, he knelt to to Aegon, the Conqueror, and he became the first Lord of Winterfell instead of King of the North. And we'll do a proper background section on him in a future episode because there's plenty of information on King and then Lord Torrhen Stark.
But just a word here. Ned, you see, you can bend the knee, basically, Ned. You could have bent the knee. There's precedent for it. You didn't have to be so stubborn.
Yeah, of course, Balerion staring you in the eye makes it a little easier to drop to that knee. I'm betting Ned would have knelt too if Balerion had been on the other side.
But with hindsight, Joffrey Baratheon was just as dangerous as Balerion the Dread.
Turns out, yeah. Yes. Who could have guessed? And then we get Cragen Stark. He's known as the Old Man of the North, as he was Lord of Winterfell for the reign of several Targaryen kings. And there's good info for a proper future background section on him as well. But one detail that I found particularly interesting is, according to a wiki of Ice and Fire, Cragen was born in 108 AC. That is pretty well known. However, his death, he died somewhere between 157 and 209 AC. So he either died at 49 or 101. I found that to be rather interesting. Here's their philosophy, if you're interested in. Cragen had a son die in one of the final battles during the conquest of Dorne. This battle occurred in either 157 or 158 AC. The son was Cregan's heir at the time, indicating that Cregan still ruled Winterfell, so he was still alive. So, Cregan died in 157 or after. Also, Cregan was succeeded as Lord of Winterfell by a son who died at the latest in 209 AC. Therefore, Cregan could have technically died in the same year as this son, but not after, meaning that 209 is the latest possible year of the death for Cregan. So, he was either 49, he was either 49 or 101, somewhere in between.
That's like the story of... Did you see the stat about Bernhard Langer, the golfer, this week?
I did not.
So he played in the Masters and he made the cut,
Yeah,
he did
very
okay. Well. He has now played in major tournaments against two players born 100 years apart.
Oh, wow.
His first major tournament, he played against a guy who was born in 1902. Guy was 74 at the time. I don't even remember the guy's name. But in the Masters this
Gene
week...
Sarazen?
Yes, that's the name. Yeah, very good. Look at you and your golf.
I was a professional golf writer once upon a time.
Right. in the Masters this week, he played against a guy born in 2002. So he's now played in...
What a cool stat!
Isn't that crazy?
That is. That's really
Look
neat.
at me with my golf stats for you.
Yeah.
So there you go, you see. So Bernhard Langer died somewhere in between 1902. But that is interesting. So Bran also talks about his grandfather, but he gets some of the information wrong, right? He tells Osha that his grandfather Rickon was beheaded by Aerys Targaryen.
Right.
But
he was... there is the whole revelation to how Rickard and Brandon died, and we'll let the story tell us that, but it wasn't beheading. I'll say that.
Yeah, interesting.
So I found that interesting. Obviously, George Martin must have known that, so he must have just thought, this little kid probably might not know exactly how his grandfather died. He just figured it was beheading. So.
Or you found rock solid pedantry. One or the other. The same.
I'm going to bet that he knew, but it's possible, I guess.
Yeah. The other two people that Bran talks to Osha through are Lyanna and Bran Stark, and we already know them pretty well.
Right.
So the other background in this chapter is about the Children of the Forest. We've preempted Luwin a bit on this one. We know that their green seers carve the faces in the Weir Woods and can use those faces to see from afar. We know that when they encountered the first men who'd crossed the land bridge from Essos, they fought wars with them and eventually used their magic to break that land bridge. A truce was called that kept the peace for 4,000 years. The pact, that truce marked the end of what's known as the Dawn Age and the beginning of the Age of Heroes. The arrival of the Andals between 2,000 and 6,000 years ago and the Faith of the Seven ended that truce. The Andals destroyed the Godwoods and... what the remnants of the Children of the Forest were forced to flee. Only in the north did the first men defeat the Andals, courtesy of... I should remember this. We just talked about it 2 minutes ago. Which Stark fought the Andals? No, which Stark fought...
It was Theon Stark, yes.
Got it. Just in time. So only in the north did the first men defeat the Andals. They threw back every army that tried to cross the neck at Moat Cailin.
All that being said, though, the oldest records of the first men, along with records from maesters that claim to have lived among the Children of the Forest, suggest that men have lived in the mouth of the Honeywine, which is where Old Town stands, since the Dawn Age. And a maester named Jellicoe suggested that the settlement at Whispering Sound began as a trading post where ships from Valyria, Old Gis, and the Summer Isles could resupply and trade with what is referred to as elder races. So I thought that was pretty neat detail.
And the elder races could be the Children of the Forest?
I guess so, yeah.
Or men that predated the first man.
Maybe. I don't know. It just said that. But yeah, could have been some Children of the Forest type stuff, or it could have been other races of humanoids. I don't know. This
is shrouded in mystery of thousands of years. So
right, yes.
Our not being quite sure is forgivable, I feel. So in comparison with the television show, this is actually a very quick scene in the television show because we skip Luwin and Bran watching the fighting. Rodrick Cassel is not in this scene at all. We see the first part of Bran's dream where he's following the crow towards the crypts, but then it cuts to Osha carrying him down to the crypts. The history of the Starks is just Grandfather Rickon and Aunt Lyanna. The TV show is cutting to the chase.
Yep.
Shaggy attacks Osha, who drops Bran, but also her torch, and the torch kind of keeps Shaggy at bay, so he doesn't actually savage her.
Oh, okay. Wow, that's very...
He
I bet Luwin would prefer this option.
Yes. First of all, he wasn't there, and second of all, nobody got it.
Right.
When they're leaving the crypts, Rickon comes out of the crypt, obviously, and says, he had the same dream. When they're leaving the crypts, Osha's the one trying to be rational. She's saying, you both miss your father, it's only natural, sort of thing.
Wow,
she is not. Yeah.
She's the voice of reason here.
But as they leave the crypts, just as they come out of the crypts, they see Luwin across the yard, and he already has the news. He looks stricken, and sort of, he's holding a piece of paper, so... the whole thing takes less than 2 minutes in the TV show.
Okay. Same, ultimately the same end, just different way of getting there, I guess.
Yeah. Pedantry.
How in the heck did Rickon get down in the crypts? And how did he find the grave in the pitch darkness?
Oh, yes.
I mean, I know he's 4 and a Stark, so he's basically a man-grown. But still, even an adult would have trouble navigating cave darkness. Surely he's too young to be firing up his own torch and he can't be much bigger than the torch as a 4-year-old.
But he might have had the torch to get down there, and he might have gone out when he got there, and so then he got into the tomb to sort of sleep or something.
Yeah, maybe
because he's Rickon. Maybe he lives down there. I mean, we don't know where he was prior to this.
Right. He might have been down there for ages. I once went down into caves in Western PA. They're called Laurel Caverns. And there's a point where, you get into this chamber way down in the depths of the caves, and they shut out all the lights that they have on. And like the level of darkness is just crazy dark. It is absolute darkness. Mm-hmm. And I would have to imagine the crypts would be fairly similar to that. So
I would think so. Yes, I would think so.
If he didn't have a torch, I do not understand how he managed to make his way to Ned's grave site.
Yeah. So news and notes, you got something about your Saxon series.
Yeah, George Martin just recently on his blog, which is called Not a Blog, he mentioned that he's a big fan of Bernard Cornwell and all of his series, but he specifically mentioned the Saxon series, which is the basis for the TV show The Last Kingdom, which you all know I'm a big fan of. And the newest book in the series was just released. It's called Warlord, and George Martin read it, and he said he loved it, and he said, quote, I'm quoting him here, Cornwell brings battles to life like no one else. So,
very nice.
If you're interested, it's out there. Go get it.
We did have one idea, which was if anyone's got any pedantry of their own, it can be chapter specific if you want, like we do, but it can be sort of broader than that if you've got something. We know that people enjoy the pedantry bits, and so if anyone's got anything they'd like to contribute, do reach out, and we'll certainly include it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we get plenty of communications from people saying that they've thought of the same. They're glad to hear someone voice thoughts that they've had. So there's got to be thoughts that we haven't voiced. So send us in. For sure. As long as it's not a spoiler, we'll put it on the air. If it is a spoiler, we'll wait until it's not a spoiler, then put it on the air.
I still remember an episode where during the introduction, we thought of some clever pedantry, and by the time we got to pedantry, we'd forgotten what it was. So there was one for sure where we missed some pedantry.
Right. That was the one where we sat for at least 5 to 10 minutes of just like dead air silence, trying to think of what it was. Just racking our brains. Which, dear listener,
McKelly did edit out before he published.
That would have made a terrible outtake.
All right, let's conclude.
Yes, sir.
So it is desperately sad for Rickon and Bran. I mean, it's easy to forget that while we're making jokes, but I mean, these are two little boys who've lost their father. They're too young for this news, and when the people who are there to comfort them are Maester Luwin, Rodrick Cassel, and Osha, that's not that's not a soft feather bed of comfort they're looking forward to.
Yeah, hopefully, maybe between the trio, they'll get what they need. They can get their safety and security from Rodrick, their education from Luwin, and maybe some compassion and understanding of fantasy, supernatural type things from Osha. Maybe with the three of them, they can cobble together what's necessary to raise these boys.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're right. Between the three of them, they wouldn't be as bad as Sam Tarly's father.
Right. Yes. Yeah. But yeah, these poor kids, they keep losing everyone that they love. Kat still hasn't come back, and she's not likely coming back anytime soon. She's heading in the wrong direction, as is Robb. And, we had hoped that if they broke the siege at River Run, maybe a hostage trade could end the conflict. But now, with, the killing of Ned, war seems destined to break out here. Like we talked last chapter, it doesn't seem like just a simple trade of hostages is going to patch things up.
Yeah, but you are right that Osha was very kind to the boys in this chapter. She was understanding and sweet and also listened to them. Luwin was trying to argue their thoughts away, whereas she was like, "Oh no, you've got a point," and taking their side against Luwin as well, which is kind of
right.
Nice.
Yeah, she was holding them when the Raven came. She was holding both of them and kind of rubbing their heads, and it seemed very very compassionate to them there.
Yeah. So McKelly raised a good question. Actually, did all the Stark kids have this dream, or at least the ones who didn't actually witness the event? Did Robb and Jon have the dream too, or was it just because a proximity to the crypts thing that brought it to Rickon and Bran?
Exactly.
And why are they having these dreams now? We thought perhaps Rickon had become something because of his injuries. He'd become
Bran.
more one of them. We thought maybe that Bran had become more, because of his injuries, had become more attuned to the sort of supernatural, but Rickon's having the same dream too. So is it just the presence of the direwolves in their lives that's made them more susceptible to these kinds of things?
Right. Or is it a Stark trait we just haven't heard about yet?
Right. Possibly, yeah.
And we've mentioned this a couple times, but maybe wasn't the greatest idea to leave Winterfell with so desperately short on defenses.
Yeah. But I mean, they've got Shaggydog. He'll take care of a lot.
That's a good point. Just put him up on the walls.
leave the gate open and Shaggydog off the chain.
Yeah. Maybe open the gate. Let Shaggydog off the chain, out of the gate, then shut the gate.
All right. So, as always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhall@gmail.com. You can follow us at Twitter @GhostHarrenhall. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
And if you wouldn't mind going out and leaving us a rate or review, we would greatly appreciate it. It would really help us, goes a long way in helping us grow the show.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.